My name is Laura Jocelyn. I'm 32, and 5 weeks ago, I told my entire family I'd lost my job. I called them one by one. My parents, my brother, my sister, and I said the same thing each time. The company downsized. I was in the round, and my landlord was already pushing. My parents went quiet. My brother Todd said he'd ask around. My sister Kristen promised to call me back that night. She didn't. The only person who showed up was my cousin Maria, the one my family calls the family disappointment. She wired me $600 from a checking account that had $940 in it. And what I did in those 5 weeks changed everything. None of them saw it coming. Welcome back to Last Laugh Stories. This is where quiet people draw their lines and walk through fire without raising their voice. If you've ever been the one holding the family together while no one held you, you'll understand this one. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I've been a bookkeeper for 9 years. I run the books for Grainville Family Medical, a small practice, 3 physicians, tucked off the main road in Granville, Ohio. My desk sits in a back office between the supply closet and the fax machine they refuse to throw away. Every morning I open the same spreadsheet, reconcile the same insurance claims, and make sure every dollar lands in the right column. Numbers are patient. They don't forget. They don't make promises they can't keep. I put myself through Licking County Community College on a Dairy Queen paycheck and a stubbornness I inherited from nobody in particular. 4 years of double shifts, grease burns on my forearms, and textbooks propped open behind the register. By 24, I had my associates. By 28, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a 1-bedroom rental condo in Newark. I still live in a modest apartment on Main Street in Granville. Nothing fancy but mine. My retirement account is healthy for 32. My life insurance policy is due $250,000. I don't say that to impress anyone. I say it because it matters later. Here's the part that matters now. Every month without being asked. I sent my mother, Carol, $200 to help cover the house. I covered my brother Todd's truck down payment 3 years ago. $3,000 never returned. I paid my sister Kristen's credit card bill twice when she was between jobs. I drove my father Wayne to his VA appointments when Carol said she had a headache. I did all of this because I thought that's what family meant. I'd been the safety net so long that I forgot to check whether anyone would catch me if I fell. The pattern didn't arrive all at once. It built itself quietly, the way water damage does, slow enough that you don't notice until the ceiling bows. Every Thanksgiving, I drove 2 hours to Carol's table carrying a casserole and a pie. Todd brought beer. Kristen brought her husband, Greg. I brought the food, the conversation starters, and the cleanup. Nobody asked me to. Nobody thanked me either. When Todd needed the $3,000 for his truck down payment, he called me on a Tuesday evening, and I wired it by Wednesday morning. He said he'd pay it back after his next commission check. That was 36 months ago when Christine's credit card hit $4,000 in interest charges. She called me crying at 11 at night. I talked her through a payment plan and covered the first 2 months myself. She never mentioned it again. When Wayne needed rides to the VA, I rearranged my work schedule 3 weeks running. Carol was home each time watching her shows. The headaches came and went with remarkable convenience. And then there was my 31st birthday. I waited for a call. Todd texted HBD at 11 at night. The way you remember a deadline 10 minutes before it's due. Carol called the next morning. Oh, was that yesterday? I've been so busy. She wasn't busy. I'd seen her post a photo of her garden that afternoon. I sat at my kitchen table that night. The apartment quiet, the phone dark on the counter, and I opened a new spreadsheet. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. I just knew that something in the math had stopped adding up. And I wasn't the kind of person who could ignore bad numbers. Column A, what I've given. Column B, what I've received. Column C, who called first. I spent 2 evenings filling it in, pulling Venmo receipts and phone records. The numbers were blunt. $12,400 given across 5 years. 0 returned, 87% of phone calls initiated by me. The number of times someone in my family had asked, "How are you, Lorna?" without following it with a request. 0. I closed the laptop and sat with the screen going dark. I didn't need the spreadsheet. I'd known the answer for years. I just hadn't been willing to see it typed out in columns with the totals underlined. The idea came to me the way most of my ideas come, not in a flash, but as a question that wouldn't leave. What if I stopped being useful? What if the one person in the family who never needed anything suddenly needed everything? Who would show up? I wasn't designing a trap. I was running an audit. There's a difference. Traps are built to punish. Audits are built to reveal, and I needed to know what the real numbers looked like. The ones that didn't show up on a bank statement. I decided on 3 rules. First, I'd tell each family member the same story. My company downsized, I was in the layoff. My landlord was making noise about the lease. Second, I wouldn't ask anyone for money. I'd just tell them the situation and watch. Third, 3 weeks. That was the window. 21 days was long enough for anyone who cared to act and short enough that the story wouldn't unravel. I wrote the rules in my notebook. Then I picked up the phone and called Carol. I rehearsed the call in my car during lunch break, parked behind the medical practice where nobody could see me. The story was simple. Granville family, medical had lost a major insurance contract. The physicians were restructuring, and my position was being eliminated at the end of the month. I'd have maybe 6 weeks of savings before I started falling behind on rent. My landlord had already sent a letter about the new lease terms. None of it was true. The practice was fine. My job was fine. My savings account had enough runway for a year, but the story had to be real enough that anyone who cared would feel the weight of it, and vague enough that anyone who didn't care could find a comfortable excuse to look away. That's the thing about family. They're very good at looking away when looking at you requires something of them. I started with Carol because she was the hardest call. If I could get through her without breaking character, the rest would be manageable. I dialed on a Monday evening. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Mom. I need to talk to you about something." Her voice was alight. She'd been watching a baking show. I could hear the host in the background explaining the difference between batter and dough. "What is it, hun?" I told her. I kept my voice steady. "A little scared. A little tired. The way you sound when you've been carrying something heavy and you're finally setting it down." When I finished, the baking show was still going in the background. Carol said, "Oh, that's a lot, Lorna." A long pause. "Well, you've always been resourceful," and she hung up. The baking show host was mid-sentence about butter temperatures. I called Wayne next. He answered on the 1st ring. He always does. "Dad, I might be in trouble." His voice changed right away. Dropped lower the way it does when he's worried. "What happened?" I told him the same story. When I finished, he was quiet for a few seconds. "Then, let me talk to your mother, Lorna. We'll figure something out." I knew what that meant. Talking to Carol about money was like talking to a locked door. You could knock, but she decided what came through. Todd was next. I caught him on his lunch break at the dealership. "That's rough." "Sis, real rough." He sounded distracted. I heard keys jangling, someone in the background laughing. "Hey, tell you what, I'll ask around. Somebody at the dealership might know a place that's hiring." He said it the way you say we should get lunch, sometime to someone you'll never call. "I'll ask around." 2 words and a gesture enough to feel generous. Cheap enough to forget by dinner. Kristen was last. She picked up from Columbus, voice bright. "Hey, what's up?" I told her. She gasped. "Oh no, Lorna. That's terrible. I'll call you back tonight." "Okay, Greg and I are about to sit down." "Okay," I said. "Tonight." I hung up and opened my notebook. I wrote down each call, the time, the duration, the exact words. Carol, 3 minutes 14 seconds. Wayne, 2 minutes 41 seconds. Todd, 4 minutes 9 seconds, mostly about himself. Kristen, 1 minute 52 seconds with a promise. I set the notebook on the kitchen counter and waited. Day 2, no calls, no texts. I checked my phone 3 times before I caught myself doing it and put it in a drawer. I'm a bookkeeper. I know what 0 looks like. Day 3. Kristen's name appeared on Instagram. She was at a wine bar in the short north with 2 friends. Glasses up. Fairy lights in the background. Caption. Self-care Sunday. I took a screenshot. I wasn't collecting evidence for a confrontation. I was documenting the data the way I document everything. So, I couldn't talk myself out of what I was seeing. Day 4, Wayne called. His voice was careful. The kind of careful that means someone told him what to say. Your mother and I were talking. She thinks you should look into unemployment benefits. She says the website is pretty straightforward. That was it. No. Do you need money? No. Come stay with us until you figure things out. Just a government website recommendation delivered in the tone of a man reading from a script his wife wrote on a napkin. Day 5. Todd posted a photo of a new Weber grill on his back deck. Chrome gleaming tongs crossed on top like a coat of arms. Caption: Summer's not over yet. No message to me. No follow-up on the asking around. I opened my notebook that evening and wrote, Day 5. 4 calls made, 0 follow-up, 0 offers, 1 Instagram post from a wine bar, 1 grill. I closed the notebook and stared at my phone on the counter. Then on day 6 it rang. The screen said Maria Beckett, my cousin, the one my family calls the disappointment. Maria's voice was tight when I picked up. The kind of tight that means someone's been worrying before they called. Lorna, I just heard from Aunt Carol that you lost your job. Why didn't you call me? I hadn't called Maria because she wasn't part of the plan. The test was for the inner circle. Parents, siblings. Maria was the cousin on the margins. The one Carol mentioned at holidays with that particular tone. Maria's trying something new again. But Maria had heard and Maria had called. I didn't want to burden you. I said, you've got your own things going on. How much do you need for rent this month? No small talk. No advice about government websites. No jingle of car keys or background laughter. Just how much? I tried to deflect. She cut me off. Lorna, just tell me the number. I gave her a number. 600. Roughly what a month's rent shortfall would look like if the story were true. 40 minutes later, my phone notification. 600 from Maria Beckett. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at that notification. Maria makes $14.50 an hour at a diner in Zanesville. She drives a 12-year-old Civic with a cracked tail light. Her checking account, I would learn later, had the $940 in it before that transfer. She sent me a 64% of everything she had. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't suggest I budget better. She didn't offer to ask around. She just sent the money and then texted. Let me know if you need more next month. That was the moment I stopped needing the spreadsheet. Maria had already balanced the only ledger that mattered. I stared at that Zelle notification from a long time. 600 from a diner paycheck, not a loan. A gift she couldn't afford from a woman the family dismissed. If you've ever had someone show up for you when nobody else would, you know what that 600 felt like. It felt like proof. Let me know in the comments if you've got a Maria in your life. And stay, because what I did next is the part nobody expected. Week 2. I sent Carol a follow-up text on a Tuesday morning, carefully worded. Mom, any thoughts on what I should do about the apartment situation? She read it. I saw the blue check marks appear. No reply that day, no reply the next. On a Wednesday evening, 48 hours later, she responded, have you tried asking your landlord for an extension? Sometimes they're flexible. That was her contribution. A suggestion I could have found in a 5-second internet search delivered 2 days late. Todd was worse. Silence. Complete silence. I called him the following Thursday. It went to voicemail. He called back 2 days later while I was at work. I stepped outside to take it. He talked about a sale he'd closed. A family from Pascagoula trading in a Subaru for a used F-150. He described the negotiation in detail, the color of the truck, the wife's hesitation, his own cleverness in closing it. 6 minutes. Then, almost as an afterthought, the way you remember to check the weather before heading out. Oh hey, how's the job thing going? I told him nothing had changed. He said, hang in there, sis. Something will turn up. And he was gone. Kristen had stopped responding entirely. Her last message was, I'll call you back tonight. 9 days ago by then. She had posted twice on Instagram since a selfie at a farmer's market. A photo of Greg's new running shoes. I added it all to the notebook. Day 9, day 10, day 11. The columns filled themselves in. Todd's I'll ask around was 10 days old. Nobody had asked around. Nobody had called back. Nobody had shown up. The pattern was no longer a theory. It was a spreadsheet with no debits. Day 12. Wayne called when Carol was at the grocery store. I could tell because his voice was different, hushed and private. The way he sounds when he's in the garage with the door down. Lorna, he paused. Do you need money? I could pull a couple hundred from my account. Your mother doesn't have to know. Before I could answer, I heard something in the background. A car door, tires on gravel. Carol's book pulling into the driveway. Wayne's voice shifted instantly, like a switch flipping. The hush was gone. The private tone evaporated. Anyway, just checking in. Your mother sends her love, take care. He hung up. I sat with that call for a long time after. Wayne wanted to help. For a brief window, maybe 11 seconds between. Doe, you need money. And the sound of Carol's tires. My father had been ready to act. But wanting isn't the same as doing. And 11 seconds of intention doesn't survive 35 years of deferring to someone else's decisions. Carol hadn't told Wayne not to help. She didn't have to. Wayne had spent so long asking Carol's permission for everything, who to buy, who to invite, how to feel about the kids, that the reflex was automatic. He didn't need a direct order. He just needed to hear the car door, and the window closed on its own. I wrote in the notebook that evening, Dad tried for 11 seconds. I underlined it. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And it was more than anyone else had offered. And then Todd handed me something I never asked for. A coworker at the medical practice, Janet, one of the nurses, pulled me aside the following Monday. Hey, Lorna, I ran into your brother at the speedway on Route 13. He mentioned you got laid off. She said it gently, the way people do when they're not sure how much you want known. I kept my face neutral. He said that. Yeah. He was filling up his truck. We chatted for a minute. He said you were having a rough go, and he was trying to help you find something. I thanked Janet and went back to my desk. I sat there for a full minute before I touched the keyboard. Todd hadn't been asking around for jobs. Todd had been talking. He had taken my crisis, the one I'd trusted him with in a private phone call, and turned it into gas station conversation. I'll ask around never meant I'll help you find work. It meant I'll use your situation as something interesting to say to a stranger between pump 3 and the register. The thing about Todd is that he's not cruel. He's careless, which is a different kind of damage. Cruelty requires effort. Carelessness just requires not thinking about anyone but yourself. My hands were steady when I logged back into the billing system. My voice was calm when I answered the next phone call from a patient. But inside, something shifted. A gear that had been stuck for years finally turned. This wasn't just apathy. This was my brother converting my dignity into 30 seconds of small talk. And he'd done it without a second thought, the way you toss a receipt in the trash, because it had already served its purpose. Day 14. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of tea gone cold when I heard a knock. Not a text, not a call, a knock. I opened the door and Maria was standing there holding a glass casserole dish in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. She'd driven 40 minutes from Zanesville on a Wednesday evening. I figured you might not be eating right, she said, stepping past me into the kitchen. When everything falls apart, you forget to feed yourself. I know because I did. She set the casserole on the counter. Chicken and rice covered in foil, still warm. The grocery bag had bread, peanut butter, bananas, and a box of those chamomile tea bags I'd mentioned liking once, maybe a year ago. She remembered. We sat at the table, and she talked about her own layoff 5 years back when she was 25 and living alone in a studio apartment in Zanesville that smelled like mildew. How she'd called Carol and Carol had said, "Well, Maria, maybe this is a sign you should try something more realistic." How she'd called her own mother, Aunt Patty, who sent $50 and a prayer card. How she ate ramen for 2 months because she was too proud to go to the food bank and nobody in the family asked if she was eating. The family called me the disappointment because I fell apart where they could see it, Maria said. She tore a piece of bread in half and handed me the bigger piece. But falling apart in public, That's how I learned who actually cared. I almost told her the truth right there. That I hadn't lost anything. That the 600 was a test she'd passed without knowing she was taking one. I held the words back. Not yet. The following weekend, Maria called again. This time, her voice was lighter, checking in. Not alarmed. She'd talked to her mother, Aunt Patty, earlier that week. Your mom called my mom. Maria said, Aunt Patty told me Carol was talking about your situation. I kept my voice level. What did she say? Something like, Lorne's going through a rough patch, but she'll figure it out. She always does. You know how Aunt Carol talks. Like she's narrating someone else's documentary. I almost smiled at that. Maria had a talent for seeing people clearly. Did she mention helping? I asked. Maria was quiet for a beat. No, she didn't. I sat with that after we hung up. Carol wasn't ignoring my situation. She was narrating it. There's a difference. Ignoring means you don't know or don't care. Narrating means you know you've processed it, and you've chosen your role, and that role is audience, not participant. Carol had placed herself at a comfortable distance, close enough to have information, far enough to avoid responsibility. She'd told Aunt Patty the story the same way she'd tell a neighbor about a storm that hit 2 counties over. Interesting, concerning in a general way, but ultimately someone else's problem. She'll figure it out. She always does. That sentence did a lot of work. It acknowledged the crisis. It expressed a vague confidence, and it absolved Carol of any obligation to act. All packed into a single breath. I recognized the technique because I'd seen it in billing disputes. When an insurance company wants to deny a claim without looking heartless, they use language that sounds supportive while committing to nothing. My mother had perfected the same skill without ever working a day in corporate. Day 18. My phone buzzed while I was at my desk. Missed call from Todd. No voicemail, except there was 47 seconds of audio that Todd never meant to send. A butt dial. I almost deleted it. I'm glad I didn't. The recording was muffled at first. Fabric against the microphone. The sound of a chair scraping. Then voices. Todd and Carol in Carol's kitchen. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Todd's voice came through first mid-sentence. She'll land on her feet. She always does. Then Carol, that's what I told Patty. And honestly, Todd, I don't have it in the budget to bail her out. Your father's Social Security barely covers us as it is. Todd, yeah, same. Hey, did you see the grill I got? Carol, oh, which one? Todd, Weber Genesis. It was on sale. 800 markdown from 12. Carol, oh, that's nice. You'll have to have us over. The voicemail ended 47 seconds. I played it a second time, then a third. 800. Todd had 800 for a grill and $0 for a phone call that lasted longer than 4 minutes. Carol didn't have it in the budget to help me. But she had it in the budget to admire Todd's purchase and schedule a barbecue. I saved the voicemail to my cloud drive. I didn't save it for a confrontation. I saved it because I'm a bookkeeper and bookkeepers keep records. That voicemail was an entry in a ledger nobody else was tracking. The one that measured what people spend their money on when they think nobody's watching. And the numbers were clear. An 800 grill from a man who said he'd ask around. A barbecue invitation from a woman who couldn't spare a phone call. I sat in my car during lunch the next day. Engine off, windows up. The parking lot behind the medical practice was empty. Everyone else was inside eating. I pulled up my phone and typed State Attorney, Licking County, Ohio. 3 results. I picked Ruth Dinham. Her office was in Newark, 15 minutes down Route 16. I called. The receptionist said she had an opening Thursday at 2. I took it. I'd been running this test to see who would show up, I thought. Putting the phone down on the passenger seat, the results were in. Now it was time to update the books. That evening, I opened the filing cabinet in my bedroom closet and pulled out the will I'd had drafted 3 years ago, right after I bought the rental condo. It was straightforward. I was 32 and single. No children, no complicated assets. The beneficiaries were listed on the second page. Carol Jocelyn 40%, Todd Jocelyn 20%, Kristen Feltz 20%, Wayne Jocelyn 20%. Maria Beckett nowhere. I stared at that page. $250,000 in life insurance. A rental condo generating $900 a month. 8 years of retirement contributions. All of it designated to people who'd spent the last 18 days proving they wouldn't cross a room for me, let alone a county. I set the document on my kitchen table and placed a pen on top of it. Then I poured a glass of water, sat down, and looked at it the way I look at a balance sheet that's been wrong for years and finally has a correction in sight. I wasn't angry. Anger is what you feel when someone surprises you. I wasn't surprised. I was just finished pretending the numbers balanced. Thursday at 2. Ruth Denham's office sat above a hardware store on West Main Street in Newark. The kind of office where the carpet is 20 years old, but the filing cabinets are meticulous. Ruth was mid-50s. Reading glasses on a chain, handshake firm and dry. She didn't waste time. "What can I help you with, Lorna?" I told her I wanted to change my will. Remove all current beneficiaries. Name one person as sole beneficiary of everything. Life insurance, retirement accounts, and the rental condo in Newark transferred into a revocable trust. Ruth wrote while I talked. When I finished, she looked up. "The beneficiary you want to add. What's the relationship?" "Cousin," I said. "Maria Beckett." Ruth nodded. "Are you anticipating any pushback from the current beneficiaries?" "Probably. In Ohio," Ruth said, setting her pen down. "A competent adult can name any beneficiary they choose. Your family members can contest if they claim undue influence or lack of testimoniement capacity. But you're 32, you're employed, and you're sitting in my office making a clear-eyed decision with no one standing over your shoulder. They can be unhappy about it." She paused. "But unhappy isn't a legal cause of action." We spent 40 minutes drafting the new will. 2 paralegals from her office served as witnesses. I signed every page. That evening at home, I logged into my retirement account and changed the beneficiary designation. Then the life insurance portal. Same change. Maria Beckett, sole beneficiary. By Friday at 4 in the afternoon, the will was signed. The retirement and insurance designations were changed online, and Ruth had filed the deed transfer to move the condo into the trust. She said the county recorder's office would need a few weeks to process the real estate side, but the paperwork was submitted, and the direction was set. I hadn't told Maria. I hadn't told anyone. The documents were filed, the designations were changed, and the only people who knew were me and an attorney above a hardware store. Week 3, I stopped reaching out. No texts, no calls, no follow-ups. I wanted to see if anyone in my family would initiate contact about my situation without being prompted. Day 19, nothing. Day 20, Kristen posted Instagram stories from Hocking Hills. Her and Greg on a trail, leaves turning, a boomerang video of a waterfall. No message to me. Her "I'll call you back tonight" was now 17 days old. Day 21, Todd's "I'll ask around" was 15 days old. No jobs, no calls, no follow-up of any kind. Day 22, my phone buzzed. A group text from Carol to the family. "My birthday is October 14th and I'd love to have everyone come for dinner. Pot roast and cake. Let me know so I can plan. October 14th, 2 weeks away." Carol had texted about her birthday dinner before she'd ever texted about my rent. She'd managed to plan a party, coordinate dishes, and send a cheerful group message. All while her eldest daughter was supposedly 1 month from losing her apartment. The text didn't mention me, didn't say, "Lorna, I hope things are improving," didn't acknowledge the crisis call at all. As far as this text was concerned, everything was normal, and maybe for Carol it was. I read the message twice. Then I typed my reply. "I'll be there. What should I bring?" Carol responded within a minute. "Just yourself, sweetheart." I set the phone down and looked out the window. The maple on Main Street was just starting to turn. Mom wanted everyone at her table. I thought she just didn't want to earn it. I marked October 14th on my calendar. Then I went back to work. The reconciliation for September was almost finished. 21 days. That's how long the test ran. My mother texted about her birthday dinner before she ever texted about my rent. If that sentence just hit you, if you've ever been the afterthought in your own family while doing the most for them, you already know what I was planning for that table. But first, Todd did something none of us saw coming. Keep watching. 2 weeks before Carol's birthday, I asked Maria to meet me for lunch. I picked a diner halfway between Granville and Zanesville. Neutral ground, quiet booths, the kind of place where waitresses call you Han and refill your coffee without asking. Maria ordered a grilled cheese. She always ordered the cheapest thing. Old habit from the lean years, she said. Though I suspected it was also because she'd wired me 600 she didn't have and was watching every penny, until the next paycheck. I waited until the food came. Then I said it. Maria, I need to tell you something. I never lost my job. She set her sandwich down. What? I made it up. All of it. The layoff. The apartment pressure. None of it was real. I told my family I was in trouble because I wanted to see who'd help. Maria stared at me across the table. I could see her processing the phone call, the 600, the casserole, the drive, all of it recalibrating. So the 600 I sent you, I'm returning every penny, I said. I already have the check written, but Maria, you were the only one. Out of everyone I called, you were the only person who showed up. Her eyes filled. She picked up her napkin and pressed it to her face. When she looked at me again, she wasn't angry. She was something else. Something that looked a lot like a woman who'd spent 30 years being told she wasn't enough and had just been told she was the only one who was. There's more I need to tell you, I said, but not today after Mom's birthday. Maria nodded slowly. She didn't push. She picked up her sandwich, Saren took a bite, and we sat together in that booth without saying much. And it was the most honest silence I'd sat in all year. 10 days before the birthday dinner. Todd ran into Maria at a speedway outside Zanesville, small town, Ohio. People cross paths at gas pumps the way city. People cross paths at coffee shops. Todd was filling the truck. Maria was grabbing a water. He spotted her through the window. Hey Maria, how's it going? She came outside. They made small talk, weather, work, the usual. Then Todd, leaning against his truck with that salesman ease, said, How's Laura doing? Still looking for a job. Maria hesitated. I'd told her the truth about the test, but I hadn't told her to keep it secret. I just hadn't told her to share it either. And Maria, who is kind, but not always careful with her words, said, Oh, she's fine. She's been fine. It was all kind of as she caught herself. I mean, she's managing. Todd's eyebrows went up. What do you mean she's been fine? I just mean she's doing better than she thought. You know, Lorna. Todd nodded. Let it drop. They said goodbye. Maria drove home with a knot in her stomach. Texted me that evening. I think I said too much to Todd at the gas station today. I'm sorry. I told her it was okay. It probably was. But driving back to Newark in that truck, Todd was replaying the conversation. She's been finer. Not, she's getting better. Not, she found something. She's been fine. Past continuous. Todd sold cars for a living. He listened to how people talked, because inflection was how you closed a deal. He knew the difference between someone recovering and someone who'd never been down. He called Carol that night. I didn't hear the call, but I can reconstruct it from what came after. Todd's voice on the phone pitched low. Mom, I ran into Maria today. She said something off. She said Lorna's been fine like the whole time. Carol, sitting in the living room, muted the television. What does that mean? I don't know. But she caught herself like she was about to say more and then pulled back. Carol sat with that. She thought about the phone call from 5 weeks ago. Lorna's voice had been steady, measured to measured. Carol had been married to a quiet man for 36 years. She knew what controlled emotion sounded like. And Lorna was a bookkeeper. Lorna counted things. Lorna tracked patterns. Lorna kept records. That night in bed, Carol said to Wayne, You don't think Lorna made the whole thing up, do you? Wayne turned from the wall. Made what up? The job, the layoff, all of it. You don't think she tested us? Wayne didn't answer right away, which was its own kind of answer. Carol called Kristen the next morning. I think your sister lied to us about the job. Kristen's voice went sharp. Why would she do that? To see what we'd do. To see who'd come running. Kristen was quiet then. That's insane. But she didn't say it was impossible. And she didn't say we should call Lorna and ask. She said, What are we going to do about it? Carol made a decision. Nothing. Not yet. She RSP for my birthday. If she tested us, I'll ask her to her face at my table on my night. The trap was now double-sided, and neither side knew the other's full hand. Carol called Todd and Kristen the next day. Her voice was calm and directional. The voice of a woman who'd spent 3 decades managing this family like a project she never got credit for. Here's what we're doing. Nobody says a word to Lorna before the dinner. If she made this up, I want to hear it from her mouth in front of everyone. Todd. Mom, are you sure that's a good idea? It's your birthday. Carol, she had 3 weeks to play her little game. I get 1 evening to ask why. Kristen agreed quickly. Partly because she wanted answers, but also because if Lorna had lied, then Kristen's silence wasn't abandonment. It was justified. Nobody abandoned someone who was never in trouble. That logic rearranged itself comfortably in Christine's mind. She'd been carrying a low, grade guilt about the unreturned call, and Carol had just handed her an escape hatch. Todd was less certain, but Todd deferred to Carol the same way did instinct, not choice. Wayne overheard the plan from the hallway. He said nothing. He went to the garage and stood there for a while, looking at the shelves of old paint cans and fishing tackle. He stayed there long enough that Carol came to the door and said, "Wayne, dinner's ready." He came inside. He sat down. He ate. Here's what nobody in that family knew. Lorna had already changed her will. Ruth Denham's documents were signed, witnessed, and filed. The retirement accounts and life insurance had new beneficiary designations. The condo was moving into a trust. Every dollar that Carol, Todd, and Kristen expected to someday inherit had already been redirected to a woman who made $14.50 an hour and drove a Civic with a cracked tail light. October 13th, the evening before Carol's birthday dinner, I stood in my kitchen wrapping Carol's gift, a silk scarf she'd admired at a shop in downtown, Grainville 3 months ago, teal with a gold edge. She'd held it up to the light and said, "Oh, that's pretty," and put it back because it was $40. I'd gone back the next week and bought it. That's the kind of daughter I was. The kind who remembered, the kind who went back. I set the wrapped scarf on the counter, next to my keys and my purse. Inside the purse, my phone with the voicemail saved. The spreadsheet backed up, the Zelle receipt from Maria screenshotted. I wasn't going to use any of it. I wasn't planning a presentation. I wasn't bringing evidence to the table like a prosecutor. The scarf was a birthday gift from a daughter who still cared enough to remember what her mother liked, even after what her mother didn't do. I chose my clothes for tomorrow. Navy dress, the one I wore to the office holiday party last year. Modest earrings, small gold studs my grandmother left me. Nothing flashy, nothing combative. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, not from the test from the years before it, the years of being the anchor, the net, the account that never overdrew. I turned off the light. I got into bed. I wasn't going to war. I was going to a birthday dinner. But for the first time in my adult life, I was walking into that house without the weight of obligation telling me how to behave, what to feel, or how much I owed. I slept well, better than I had in weeks. October 14th, 52 breeze, overcast, leaves dropping. I pulled into Carol and Wayne's driveway at 5:15. Todd's new truck was already there, parked at an angle, the way he always parks it, taking up space. Kristen and Greg's Honda Accord sat neatly behind it. Maria's 12th year, old Civic was at the curb. I sat in my car for 30 seconds, breathed, picked up the scarf, and walked to the front door. Inside, the house smelled like pot roast and rosemary. Carol had set the dining room table, her good plates, the ones with the blue rim she only brings out for holidays, balloons in the kitchen, a sheet cake on the counter. Happy 60th, Carol in purple frosting. Carol hugged me at the door. The hug was short, stiff, not cold exactly, but held at a distance, like she was bracing for something. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said. I handed her the scarf. She took it without opening it. "Thank you, sweetheart. Come in. Everyone's here." Todd was in the living room with a beer, talking to Greg about something he'd seen on a car auction site. He nodded at me but didn't stand up. Kristen was helping set the table. "Hey sis," she said, bright and quick. "The way you greet someone you're planning to corner later." Wayne was in his chair by the window. He squeezed my shoulder when I passed, didn't say anything. Maria was in the kitchen filling water glasses. She caught my eye across the room and held it for a beat. Steady, warm. The kind of look that says I'm here without making a sound. I took my seat. The pot roast was carved, the rolls were passed, and somewhere beneath the birthday's small talk and the clinking of forks, I could feel it. The room holding its breath. Dinner lasted 40 minutes. Greg and Wayne carried most of the conversation. Football, the weather, whether the county would finally fix the pothole on Cherry Valley Road. Normal things, safety things. Todd told a story about a customer who'd tried to trade a car with a raccoon living in the back seat. Everyone laughed. Even I laughed. It was a good story. Carol refilled her wine twice. She was watching me. Every time I'd spoke, her eyes narrowed slightly, the way they do when she's measuring. She'd been doing it since I walked in. But now, with 2 glasses of Pinot Grigio softening the edges, the scrutiny was less disguised. The cake was still on the counter. Nobody had moved to cut it. Kristen started clearing plates. Todd leaned back and then Carol set her glass down, not hard, but deliberately, the stem clicking against the table, and said, "So Lorna, how's work?" The table went quiet. Not silent, quiet. The difference between a room where people stop talking and a room where people stop breathing. Everyone in that room knew I'd lost my job. Everyone in that room had been briefed on the test theory. And Carol had just lobbed the grenade with a smile. I set my fork on my plate. "Work is fine, Mom." Carol tilted her head. "Fine. I thought you lost your job." The room tightened. Greg looked at Kristen. Todd looked at Carol. Wayne looked at his plate. Maria sat still, hands folded in her lap, face unreadable. I met my mother's eyes, held to them. "I didn't lose anything," I said. 6 seconds of silence. I counted them by the clock on the wall behind Carol's ahead. Then Carol said, "What does that mean?" I kept my voice level, the same voice I use when I'm reading a discrepancy to a physician who doesn't want to hear it. Flat, clear, no anger in it because anger wasn't what this required. "I never lost my job," I said. "I told each of you I did. Same story, same details. I wanted to see who'd show up." Todd put down his beer. The bottle hit the table too hard. "You're saying you lied to us. I told you I was in trouble, and I watched what each of you did with that information." I turned to Carol. "Mom, you told me to be resourceful. Then you told Aunt Patty I'd figure it out." I turned to Todd. "You said you'd ask her around. You didn't ask around. You told Jeanette at the Speedway about my situation like it was weather." Todd's jaw tightened. "How do you and then you bought an 800 grill? How do you know about the grill? You butt-dialed me." "Todd, I heard the whole conversation. You and Mom in the kitchen. She said she didn't have it in the budget to help me. And then you told her about the Weber Genesis and she said, 'Oh, that's nice.'" Todd went white. Carol's hand went flat on the table. I looked at Kristen. "And you said you'd call me back that night. That was 5 weeks ago." Kristen's eyes were wet. "I meant to. I was going to. I know I said it gently because I did know. She meant to. She just didn't. And meaning to is the most comfortable way to do nothing." Carol stood. Her chair scraped the floor. "So, this was a game to you?" I stayed seated. "No, it was a question, and every one of you answered it." Carol's hands were shaking. She gripped the back of her chair, and her knuckles went pale. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You made us look. You made me look. I didn't make you look like anything, Mom. I gave you a chance to show up. You chose not to. I am your mother. You don't test your mother." My voice stayed where it was. Low, even. Mothers don't need to be tested when they're already showing up. Carol turned to Wayne. "Say something. Are you just going to sit there?" Wayne opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at me. He looked at Carol. Something crossed his face. 35 years of swallowed words, of deferred opinions, of choosing peace over truth. Then Wayne said quietly, "She's right, Carol." The room stopped. Carol stared at him as if he'd reached across the table and struck her. Todd shifted in his chair. Kristen pressed a napkin to her eyes. Greg looked like the man who desperately wished he were somewhere else. Carol turned on Maria. "And you? You're the hero now." Maria, who can't hold a job for more than 6 months. Maria had been still through all of it, hands folded, back straight. She didn't flinch. I wired her 600 I didn't have. Aunt Carol, what did you send her? Carol's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I watched my mother search for a response and find the shelf empty. Then, I said evenly, you told Todd in the kitchen that I'd land on my feet. She always does. Those were your exact words, Mom. While Todd was showing you his new grill. Carol sat down. The chair didn't scrape this time. She lowered herself into it, like someone who'd just been told the floor might not hold. Todd leaned forward. He was trying to find the angle. The salesman in him, looking for the clothes. Fine. You tested us. We failed. Okay. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? And an apology, because I'm sorry, Lorna. We should have done more. There. Can we move on? I looked at him. I don't want an apology, Todd. Then what do you want? I've already made my decision. Carol's eyes sharpened. What decision? I folded my hands on the table. I changed my will 2 weeks ago before any of you knew about the test. The silence that followed wasn't like the earlier ones. Those had been tense. This one was vacuum. Todd, you what? Kristen. What do you mean? Changed your will. I kept my voice steady. My life insurance, my retirement accounts, the rental condo in New York. I went to an estate attorney and redirected everything. Carol leaned forward. Redirected to whom? To Maria. Maria's head turned toward me. Her lips parted. I hadn't told her this part. This was the more I'd promised at the diner, and she was hearing it at the same table as everyone else. Kristen, you can't do that. I can. In Ohio, a competent adult can name any beneficiary they choose. My attorney confirmed it. Carol, you're punishing us. That's what this is. No, I said I'm reflecting what happened. Maria showed up. You didn't. The will reflects who showed up. Todd stood, his chair tipped. Over a phone call. You're cutting us out over a phone call. Over a lifetime of phone calls, Todd. I looked at him. I just finally stopped pretending the ledger would balance. Maria's eyes were wide. She was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before. Not gratitude exactly, and not shock. Something closer to disbelief, that someone had weighed her and found her worth more than she'd ever been told. Lorna, I didn't send the money, for I know, I said. That's exactly why. Carol pointed at Maria. You two planned this. You planned this together. Maria shook her head. I found out about the test 2 weeks ago, Aunt Carol. I found out about the will 30 seconds ago. Same as you. She's lying. Carol said. Nobody's lying. I said. That's the whole point. I asked a question. Everyone answered. I filed the paperwork. There was no plan. There was just math. Wayne stood up from his chair. He moved slowly, the way he does when his back is giving him trouble, and he walked around the table to where I was sitting. He put his hand on my shoulder, the same hand that had reached for the phone 5 weeks ago, and put it down when he heard Carol's car. Your mother and I should have done better, Wayne said. His voice was rough. I should have done better. Carol, Wayne, what are you? Carol, stop, nothing else. Quiet and final, I looked up at my father. He met my eyes. Whatever had been stuck between us for years. The 11 seconds, the deferred phone calls, the garage where he went to avoid decisions, something in it loosened. It wasn't absolution. It was acknowledgement. And from Wayne, that was everything. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair. The scarf I'd bought for Carol was still on the counter, sitting in its wrapping next to the birthday cake. Nobody had cut. I stood and pushed my chair in. Todd said, You're really going to walk out of Mom's birthday dinner? I stopped. I brought a gift. I showed up for dinner. I answered every question. Honestly, I looked at him. That's more than anyone in this room did for me 5 weeks ago. Carol was gripping the back of her chair again. The same chair, the same knuckles, but something in her posture had changed. She looked smaller. I turned to her. Happy birthday, Mom. I walked to the front door and pulled it open. October air cold, clean, the smell of wet leaves and wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Behind me, I could hear Todd saying something to Kristen. Carol's voice lower now, a chair moving. Then the door opened again and Maria came out. She stood beside me on the porch, arms crossed against the chill. We didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there looking at the driveway. Todd's oversized truck, Kristen's sensible sedan, Maria's Civic with the cracked tail light, my 10-year-old Corolla. Maria spoke first. You didn't have to do that. The will thing.
Yeah, I did.
Why? Because numbers don't lie, Maria, and neither do you. She looked at me. Then she reached out and squeezed my arm. One firm press, the kind that says more than a hug. We walked to our separate cars. I drove east toward Granville. Maria drove south toward Zanesville. Separate roads, separate towns. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't driving alone. The week after Carol's birthday was the quietest my phone had ever been. Then slowly the calls started. Todd first. He called twice. I let both go to voicemail. The first one was short. Lorna. Listen, I think we should talk about what happened. The second, a day later, was longer. He started defensive, then softened, then circled back to defensive. He used the phrase overblown twice. He ended with, just call me back, okay? I didn't. Kristen sent a text. 4 paragraphs dense with explanation. She'd been busy with work. She and Greg had been going through a rough patch. She didn't know how serious my situation was. She'd meant to call. Buried in the 3rd paragraph, between a description of her schedule and a reminder that she loved me, was a single line. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I read the whole thing once, then I typed, "Thank you for writing, Kristen," and set my phone down. Carol didn't call. She didn't text. The silence from her was different now. Not the strategic silence of a woman managing a narrative, but the wounded silence of someone who'd been seen clearly and didn't like the view. Wayne called once on a Thursday evening. His voice was steady. I'm sorry, Lorna. I should have picked up that phone and I shouldn't have let it go. I know, Dad. Are you okay? I'm okay. We talked for 9 minutes. He told me about a fishing spot he'd found on a Buckeye Lake. I told him about a billing error I'd caught that saved the practice 6,000. Normal things, real things. When we hung up, it was the longest honest conversation I'd had with my father in years. Maria texted me on a Sunday. I deposited your 600 check. But I want you to know I would have wired it again. I believed her. November came in gray and sharp the way it does in central Ohio. I went to Thanksgiving at Carol's house, but this time I brought Maria, and I didn't bring a casserole for 12. I brought a salad for 4 and a bottle of wine. Carol noticed. She didn't say anything. She set an extra place for Maria without comment and served the turkey with a smile that didn't reach the corners. Todd was polite, distant. He talked to Greg about the Browns. He didn't mention the will. He didn't mention the test. He did ask me once at the end of the night. Are we okay? I said. We're getting there, Todd. He nodded. He didn't push. Kristen hugged me when she left. She held on a little longer than usual. I'm going to do better, she said into my shoulder. I let her hold on. I didn't promise anything. I stopped sending Carol $200 a month. She noticed by December. She didn't bring it up, neither did I. Todd never mentioned the 3,000. He didn't ask for it back. Didn't offer to repay it. The absence of that conversation told me everything the conversation would have. The will stayed. Ruth Denham's office had it on file. Maria knew the family suspected, but couldn't confirm. I bought Maria a winter coat in January, a good one, lined from a store in Newark. She cried when she opened it. You don't have to keep. I'm not keeping score anymore, Maria. That's the whole point. People will show you exactly who they are the moment you stop being useful to them. And the ones who stay are the only ones who were ever really there. That's my story. 3 weeks of silence, one cousin who drove 40 minutes with a casserole she couldn't afford, and a will that now says exactly what it should have said all along. If this story reminded you to look around and notice who's actually showing up in your life, not just the people who are supposed to, but the ones who choose to hold on to them. And if you've got someone in your family who the world calls a disappointment, but who's never once disappointed you, tell them today. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.